It's safe to say people today enjoy more sexual freedom than ever before. Sometimes we can take this freedom for granted, never once entertaining the idea that it can all be taken away in a moment's time, as history has repeatedly shown. Stephen Toushin helped redefine and shape modern perceptions of what is and what isn't obscene, but faced an uphill battle with the moral right and the government, which was practically synonymous in the early days of pornography. In this episode, we're going to celebrate Stephen Toushin, the owner of the Bijou, a popular gay theater in Chicago, and later Bijou Video, producer and distributor of many gay porn classics. Toushin was a professional defendant whose businesses were raided and would go on to spend a majority of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s fighting obscenity charges and avoiding federal prison. This is Demystifying Gay Porn. My name is Ike Grande, and if you watch gay porn, I've definitely helped to get off. Before we continue, I want to remind you to help this channel by clicking the subscribe button and selecting the bell icon for notifications to see more content like this. Very little is publicly known about Stephen Toushin's early life. Toushin was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and when he was 11, his father, who at the time aged 43, was not sick nor old, but had lost a desire to go on in life. Toushin describes his father and being in the room when his father died, and the powerlessness he felt not being able to do anything. He later went on to live with his grandparents. His grandfather was sick and would eventually pass away in young Toushin's arms. Toushin regards both of these events as life-changing moments. Before getting to Chicago, Toushin left New York City in 1966 with the goal of seeing Marlene Dietrich at Expo in Montreal. He jumped on his bicycle and rode up to Burlington, Vermont, where he found work and stayed for the summer. He spent the next 2 years traveling New England. Toushin sold his bike, hitchhiked his way across the country, making his way to Chicago. While there, Toushin was staying in a place with 10 young adults his age. He met someone who told him his uncle was looking for a manager for his theater. Toushin said he was interested and was offered the job managing Aardvark Theater in Piper's Alley in Old Town Chicago. At the time, the theater was showing avant-garde, experimental films made by established underground filmmakers. It wasn't until the theater began showing art films with nudity that the theater began to show a return in numbers. In 1970, the opportunity to show I'm a Curious Yellow presented itself, and Toushin took it.
The Bijou Theater in Chicago is not the kind of theater you send your kids to for a double matinee on Saturday afternoon. It's a mecca for homosexual sex, both on and off the screen. It's owned by Stephen Toushin.
In 1969, Toushin got his first obscenity arrest for showing Jack Smith's film Flaming Creatures. Toushin couldn't make anything of the arrest since he felt it was an absurd charge. Flaming Creatures is not pornographic, but it did have nudity. Flaming Creatures is now considered an experimental classic. In 1962, however, it was deemed obscene and banned. Toushin made the decision to work in the adult business, not just to be a pornographer or sell porn. He wanted to work in all aspects of sexuality, both straight and gay. For Toushin, sexuality and kink were not just his business, they were his way of life. Toushin and his partners bought a theater in Indianapolis and showed I'm a Curious Yellow again. Upon screening the film, Toushin was arrested for the second time on obscenity laws. He won the case, his license was renewed, and the proceeds from the screenings paid for a down payment and renovation of the theater. Afterwards, Toushin and his partners decided that all their theaters would now show hardcore films. Toushin would go on to own straight and gay theaters in Chicago, San Francisco, East Chicago, and Indianapolis. He also owned bookstores, live sex clubs, massage parlors, gay bathhouses, and private BDSM clubs. Toushin began to produce S&M movies in the 1970s on 16mm and would sell them to movie theaters or down-convert them to 8mm for the home market available through mail order or at adult bookstores. Toushin would go on to distribute such films as Everything But the Kitchen Sink, Needles and Pins, Slave and Master, and my personal favorite title, You Said a Mouthful. Under Bijou, Toushin would produce gay and straight porn and BDSM films. He owned a gay video mail order company and distributed and sold poppers. The Bijou video catalog was the Bible of gay adult films, which gave Bijou the reputation as a place to buy gay films. On November 18, 1987, Toushin watched as men with bulletproof vests, shotguns, and handguns ran through his office. 42 to 45 FBI agents, postal inspectors, Chicago police, and an assistant U.S. attorney swarmed in and around his building. Toushin's business had been surveilled for 2 weeks by a large mobile home that had been parked down the street. The raid was a part of an investigation that began in 1985 involving Postal Inspector Perry LaPierre of Tennessee. LaPierre became aware of Bijou video when a man from Nashville reported receiving unsolicited advertisements from Bijou. LaPierre, under a fictitious name, placed an order for a video catalog, which he received by mail. LaPierre ordered videos from the catalog, including Erotic Hands, the final chapter of Mistress Anne, Please Sir, and You Said a Mouthful. The raid was a part of finding evidence to support the charges of aiding and abetting, conspiracy mailing obscene matter, and interstate transportation of obscene matter.
Stephen Toushin was identified as the largest distributor of gay-type pornographic material in the United States.
After gathering enough evidence, U.S. Postal Inspector Perry LaPierre and agents from Tennessee sought and received permission to raid Toushin's Chicago headquarters.
On the date of the search, there were probably 30 or so employees present and working. We found additional files indicating as many as 50 employees. And these employees were engaged in the full production process of video distribution, including the actual filming of various videos at the office in the Bijou, advertising layouts, duping equipment, banks of VCRs, a large shipping room, anything associated with the distribution. His main catalog had over 1,100 titles in it, making it the largest catalog of its type in the United States. It contained graphic descriptions of pornographic videos available for sale, the majority of which were gay.
Evidence seized during the raid was presented to a grand jury 7 months later. Toushin and 2 of his employees were indicted in Utah and Tennessee. The Utah indictment included 6 counts against his employees, business, and himself, and 2 counts for sending advertisements to 2 fictitious names. The charges in Tennessee were similar, except they included a conspiracy charge. People in the adult entertainment industry had been waiting for a moral crusade since the release of the Mies Report and Commission on Pornography. After the report was released, President Reagan made a speech on America's moral values. He introduced new sentencing guidelines which would put convicted offenders in prison for longer periods of time, which Attorney General Mies had made public in 1986. Toushin's business was targeted by the Mies Commission in its first sting and entrapment operation called Project Post Porn. The government made wild claims about who and what were solicited to, with obscene material and advertising to which Toushin retorted, the only way someone would be solicited to was if they sent $20 to receive mailings for a 3-month period. Toushin went to trial, and what is detailed in the transcripts is nothing short of insane. The case went to trial with particular movies as the target. Lawyers, the defense, the prosecution, the jurors were all made to watch films as a part of the state's evidence. Jurors fainted, one left and never came back. During sentencing, the judge remarked, the only victims in this trial were the 16 jurors and alternate jurors, plus the courtroom staffers who were forced to view these tapes. The judge placed the responsibility on the postal inspectors who selected the films and the prosecutors who insisted they were shown during the trial. Toushin was asked if he had a statement to make, to which he did, and defended himself under the First Amendment. While the judge never hid his distaste for Toushin, his companies, and his way of life, he did, however, care about the Constitution and personal liberties. Toushin received 5 years probation that ran concurrently with the time he was currently serving. Toushin was released from prison in April of 1990 after winning an appeal on his tax case. After he was released, Toushin was able to obtain transcripts and court testimonies describing in detail the government's intention to have him murdered. He obtained these files through a criminal attorney in Chicago who also happened to represent Frank Schweiss in his trial. Park Elliott Dietz, an expert witness who testified in the Stephen Toushin case, would also testify in the Jeffrey Dahmer case 3 years later. Dahmer coincidentally killed one of Toushin's employees, Jeremy Weinberger. Jeremy, who worked at the Bijou, left Chicago early Saturday morning to Milwaukee with a stranger he had met the night before at a local bar called Carol's Speakeasy. After a day of not hearing from Jeremy, who was a committed good worker and friend, the staff at Bijou began to worry. Days turned into weeks. After the grisly news began to pour out of Milwaukee, police came to the Bijou where Jeremy worked and asked to speak to one of Jeremy's co-workers, who had spoken to the police when they filed a missing persons report earlier. Stephen Toushin is a fascinating individual who became the owner and founder of Bijou Video, a huge advocate and believer of civil liberties, and very involved in the S&M community. And it's pretty easy to surmise that people today don't really know, many don't care about the history of legal battles fought by nude and fetish magazines, adult bookstores, private clubs, and filmmakers. Toushin's trial would be the first of its kind because it created the first legal debate about the meaning and practice of sadomasochism, and it also scientifically and legally redefined S&M as a sexual subculture practiced by consenting adults for mutual pleasure. You've been watching Demystifying Gay Porn. I am your host, Ike Grande. Demystifying Gay Porn can be found on every podcast directory as well as YouTube. Demystifying Gay Porn is on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Telegram. If you like what you're watching and want to be a part of the process, head over to patreon.com/demystifyinggayporn, where you can help this YouTube channel and I can continue making content like this. Once again, this is Demystifying Gay Porn. My name is Ike Grande, and if you watch gay porn, I've definitely helped to get off. Cheers.